The views expressed and the opinions given by the individual host and their guests do not necessarily reflect those of ParaX, its affiliates, or its sponsors.
Step outside of your comfort zone. See the world with a whole new perspective. Join us and experience the unexplained on the Paranormal View.
And welcome everybody right here to the Paranormal View on the ParaX Radio Network. I want to thank everyone for being with us tonight. Those in the chat room and those listening from around the world, we appreciate each and every one. And I'm sure that there's still a lot of people that's locked down, can't get out and go do things. So we hope you just sit back and enjoy the show tonight. We've got a great show lined up. And with us tonight, we have Barbara Duncan.
I am here.
And we have Jeffrey Gould.
He may have dropped off the call.
Oh, he did. Wow. Well, until he gets back, do you think you can introduce our guest, Barbara?
Well, I think I know who she is.
Oh, okay.
We've talked several times. She's an awesome guest, as a matter of fact. I assume paranormal investigator, psychic, and paranormal parapsychology scholar, which is different than paranormal. Please get that right, folks. Yeah. Oh, well, it really does make a difference because I've studied parapsychology and the paranormal. They are two different little beasts. We both know. Yes. It's our guest, Darcy Mcgrath.
Hi, everybody.
Yay.
All right.
And, we'll probably have a better introduction once Jeff gets back on. He does all the bio stuff.
Yeah, let me see if
But it's always lots of fun just talking with Darcy.
I
like your shop. Yeah.
All right.
It's so
let me call him back in here. Well,
yeah.
Jeff, are you on?
Nope.
No.
He's not. Because we can talk a little bit about... Yeah, let's talk a little bit about the difference between paranormal and parapsychology. Because I don't think a lot of people know.
Right. And, there really isn't a big difference as it is a field of study. Paranormal is basically anything outside the normal, something that cannot be explained by regular senses or science, or standard science, I should say. Parapsychology is the study of human consciousness, or trying to determine the origins of human consciousness, where it resides, and if it survives the person themselves that is affecting the atmosphere through psychokinesis, telekinesis, RSPK, current spontaneous psychokinesis, which is otherwise known as poltergeist.
You guys were muted. I tried to call Jeff, and it blanked you guys out, and it took me a second to get you guys back on. So,
oh no!
Yeah.
You mean that whole conversation?
Yeah, and I was trying to get you back on. Matter of fact, I even added you to another call, and you didn't pick up on it. So, Jeff, are you back on? No. Let me add Jeff back in here then, because I got him right here. Hopefully.
Okay, he can add himself back in too.
Well, he was trying. I don't think he did very good. So, I'm calling him now, trying to get him back in. Anyway.
So nobody heard our lovely little discussion?
Nobody heard it. You can do it all again. That's because I didn't even hear it.
Darcy, let's talk about the difference between paranormal investigations and parapsychology.
Sure. Paranormal investigating tends to focus on the external stimulus going on in the house, whether you're hearing audio phenomenon or experiencing visual phenomenon. The paranormal investigators will go through using their equipment to gauge the environment and try to capture some of that phenomenon that the experiencer in the location might be experiencing. It helps give them peace of mind that this is not something that they're making up in their head. So that serves a distinct purpose. Parapsychology actually studies human consciousness, so it looks for the haunting within. So it's actually looking at psychic ability, gauging psychic ability, how the person's consciousness might be affecting the location and maybe even adding to the paranormal activity going on in the house that might be separate from an external entity that might be in the house. So while the paranormal investigators are going around with their equipment, a parapsychologist might go around. Oh, I think we got Jeffrey back.
Yeah. Yes.
There he is.
And the parapsychologist also would be looking at, I would assume, the subjects thinking, is this a possible case of telekinesis? Is this a possible case of common ESP? Or is there something else going on there too? So that you're absolutely right. There can be live human reasons behind paranormal activity.
Mm-hmm. And if you're lucky enough to have a parapsychologist that has a strong psychological background, they might be able to screen for other things, such as maybe possible bipolar or schizophrenia or other mental disorders that might be adding to the situation. I'm not a psychologist. I would like to hopefully finish that degree someday. Mm-hmm. But I know a lot of parapsychologists that do have backgrounds in that, and they can screen for those things.
Mm-hmm. And it's also really interesting to see that there are branches of that too. Like a lot of neurobiologists are discussing, we really haven't completely evolved as a human species yet. Our brains will probably still be evolving. So that there are differences in how some people behave on a more evolutionary scale.
Absolutely. Yeah. And we've talked about that in our human consciousness class. For anybody that's interested in learning more about human consciousness, the Rhine is doing ongoing online classes right now, if I can give a shameless plug. We're taking one right now with Professor Loyd Auerbach, who is a parapsychologist and has been for many, many years. And we actually talked about some of that in our class about near-death experiences. Mm-hmm. And how are they really near-death experiences, or do we just have a failed understanding of what death is? Do we have we have a clinical definition of what death is to us right now, but even with our equipment, our medical equipment that we have plugged into, the client who's having this phenomena happening to them, we're still grasping at what that technology is telling us. So,
well, I think we talked about before about this. There's a book called The Origins of the Human Consciousness and the Breakdown of the Bicameral Mind by Julian Jaynes. And even back then, he was talking about early human consciousness levels and the voices from God, etc., and the fact that the mind hadn't quietly split into the left brain, right brain hemispheres. So there was that audio hallucinations that were actually one part of the brain trying to talk to the other part of the brain. So even back then, you find an evolutionary process that may still be happening here, because we haven't quite figured out how the brain totally works yet either.
Right, yeah. And back then we often attributed those visions to paranormal sources, which nowadays we're looking at a little differently. Mm-hmm. Shamans being able to receive information through ritual and people having prophetic visions. Nowadays we look at that more as clairvoyance and prognostication versus prophecy experiences. Mm-hmm. So our understanding has updated as we study. So.
Yeah. Paraanthropology is just a lovely subject to get into.
Oh, I love that. Yeah. If anybody's interested in that, Dr. Christopher Larson at North Carolina Wilmington does quite a bit with that, and so does Professor Loyd Auerbach.
There is an online magazine now called the Journal of Paraanthropology.
Paraanthropology, yes, I love that.
Lovely book. Lovely book. I love it. Yeah.
So everything falls into the category of para.
Yeah, it's outside the standard scientific understanding. So, yeah. And that's where I have a lot of conversations with people that have experiences. And I say, well, it could be this, it could be this, it could be this. Well, prove to me it's not paranormal. I said, I just did. It could be that you have other explanations for how this could be happening. And they just look at me puzzled like they don't understand. And I think, media feeds into that. But they kind of forget what the definition of paranormal really is.
Yeah.
Oh.
Are we all there?
Yeah, we're still on. I thought Barbara was fixing to ask something else, so.
Well, we were just talking. We could talk shop for hours right now, I'll tell you right now.
Yeah.
Because quite frankly, there's a lot happening. And, it's interesting that it's happening now, and if there is an uptick in paranormal activity, and how much of it is simply pent up energy, as we talk about poltergeist cases being nothing more than pent up energy and nowhere to basically funnel it to.
Matter of fact, I got this article that we were talking about tonight with the New York Times. I got it from the Paranormal Research Foundation, and they turned me on to, because I'm on their Facebook site, and I was reading it, and I posted it to my site, and I half jokingly said, well, there goes my paper idea, because I always thought that would be a fascinating paper to write about ghosts in quarantine, what kind of experiences where people have. So who answers but Brian Williams, the head of the PRF? And so when are you going to write it, basically, is what he said. And I'm like, oh, my God.
Well, now you're stuck.
Oh, yeah. Well, we started hashing out, how could we do this? How do we clarify experiences versus, COVID virus. I mean, one of the main symptoms of the COVID virus is, of course, high fever.
Right.
And it's like, well, how do you know people are hallucinating with the high fever? How do you rule that person didn't have COVID? And how do you ask that without violating HIPAA? And and so we were kind of tossing some ideas back and forth. But I think a quantitative study of the number of people. So if anybody wants to contact me at my Facebook site and tell me their stories, I would love to hear them. Well, so if you have any listeners tonight that are having experiences out there, I'd love to hear them, and maybe I can plug a survey in and have them feed me some information on that.
Oh, good idea.
So with parapsychology, when someone says they heard something or seen something, through parapsychology, you start checking to see if there is something or if it's something else altogether. And when you get rid of everything else, does anything lead back to saying, oh, yeah, it must be a spirit or something?
Well, there's never going to be 100% definitive, yes, it's a spirit, but you can definitely add more evidence to the fact that it could be. Any skeptic's going to find a way to tear this apart, unfortunately. We're not at a stage right now where we can say 100% and prove it that we have a spirit here, but we can rule things out specifically, like, again, were you suffering a high fever at the time? Have you been diagnosed with COVID? Have you had paranormal experiences before this at this location? Have you had paranormal experiences at other locations before this? Has your family had experiences within their own family in different locations? And, things like that. You can go down a survey checklist and start feeding into the possibility that, oh, maybe this could be a psychic experience, a mediumship, or, psychic experience where they have really witnessed something. Now, it's kind of, you have to rule some things out. And I get these cases every year, and everybody does too, that does paranormal investigating, where people are outside in the summertime enjoying themselves and having a blast, and then they come back in the fall, and all of a sudden they forget what their house sounds like. They forget about the furnace checking on, and oh my gosh, the bangs and the shimmies in the register are suddenly a ghost, or the animals that are digging into the attic for the wintertime to hunker down are scratching and clawing at the ceiling, and oh my gosh, we got a ghost up there. And it's quick. People can be quick to jump to judgment that they have a paranormal thing going on, and you have to rule those things out. And I've done that before.
Okay.
Where I've been into houses and had to dig through attics.
I actually like in one the first or second Conjuring movie, which is kind of loosely based on Lorraine and Ed Warren. they do show them in one house showing that the sounds they're hearing are the pipes up in the attic. And I was like, that's impressive. They didn't just jump right into Zach Bagan. Well, you must have a demon territory.
Yeah, no, that came later. But you got to rule those things out, because obviously if you can't be chasing ghosts if that's not what it is at all, and you're not adding any credence to the field too if you're automatically jumping to that conclusion. Very and true. You're not helping the client either.
Yeah. Now, I know that I've been on case or in places where you've actually done investigating, and I mean you had equipment set up everywhere. My question is, have you ever got any evidence, and was it voices or was it just sounds?
I seem to be the one that's really good at capturing EVP. I had some thrown at me by a mutual friend of ours and said, hey, you should hear this. It's, we were over at the monument in Gettysburg, and it was near the dogs, or the dog monument, the Irish Brigade document, or monument there. And it's like, you can hear the dog barking. And I said, well, send me the link. And he sent it to me, and I'm like, that's not what I hear at all. They're saying your name. And he's like, whoa, what? I said, well, I have to listen to the original recording. This sounds like it's been run through a filter, so we'll have to look at that. But that's just something that my ear is a little bit better than most. And I have heard from other people too, that if you are in music or in music production, those people are really good for listening for dissonance, what's not supposed to be there. They're a little bit better at clearing that out in their mind while they're listening. Other people, it takes a lot of practice to do that. But I usually jump in there and I can hear that stuff a little clearer than others, but that's just my strength.
Now let's talk a little bit about the cases where you would find that it may not be paranormal, it may be the person involved in that too. Is there a method now where you can set up saying, well, poltergeist activity, well, it could be something paranormal. It could also be just the mind being able to use the energy. Like, I think we all figured out that through martial arts and Taoist monks that you can use qi to push things away. So at what point do you start to analyze the client and simply say, well, you know what, you may have the ability, it may be paranormal, but it's not a ghost.
Right, and that could be sometimes where I get called back more than once. And a medium, a good practice medium who's been doing field investigation for a while, not just any medium. I have some people that are like, well, my next door neighbor came over and she's been able to see things since she was little and she says it's this. Well, somebody who does mediumship sporadically versus somebody who does it either professionally or in regular field investigation is going to have a little sharper focus on what's going on. And I'll have mediums, and I do have mediums that can come in and they can distinguish between a thought projection or discarnate, a dead person. So they can walk through the house. And of course, if they're walking through the house and they're not finding any dead people, but we're having evidence of things happening, things moving, things apporting, moving from place to place in a blink of an eye, that's a sign of psychokinesis at work. And then the real challenge then, especially if you have a multiple person household, is trying to figure out which one of them it is. And you could have multiples.
True.
You could have two, and I had that in a case in downtown here, where they called me back repeatedly, and they're reporting the same phenomenon happening over and over. And I said, this sounds like PK. And when it started formulating a psychological pattern, a projection of the subconscious that's dealing or wrestling with an issue, a psychological issue, will oftentimes manifest in the activity that's happening. Mm-hmm. And it's, if somebody's having trouble, like with Loyd Auerbach had a case one time with a young boy that really didn't want to be on the swim team, but his parents were pressuring him to do it. There would be water phenomena happening all over the house. the sinks would come on by themselves. Water would appear in midair and just fall to the floor. And it was his subconscious manifesting that desire to tell his parents, I don't want to be in swim class, but he just couldn't do it. And it was manifesting in this phenomenon in this way. And in the case we had downtown here, the son had come out of the closet, and he was struggling with his own sexual identity. The family, from what I understood, seemed very comfortable with the fact, who knows what the family dynamic is when you step outside the house? You don't know. Unless you really, really dig in and play therapist, which I can't do. But, there's no problem there. But you could tell by all the photos that were being rearranged in the living room, all of the immediate family members' photos were inverted upside down. Every single photo sitting on the shelf were upside down, except for one. And I said, well, who's this handsome gentleman here? Oh, well, that's his grandfather. He's the only one that doesn't know right now. So his perceived relationship with his family was upside down with everybody that knew. But his grandfather didn't know, so that relationship was okay.
Huh.
Wow. So when you start seeing psychological things like that, then it's more or less a living agent than it is a discarnate.
So when we start talking about these battling energies, or I should say subconscious arguments that are going back and forth, when we start talking about, and I hate the word tulpa because it's getting really overused, but when you start looking at family dynamics or group dynamics and you start thinking these arguments themselves could be creating something that just sort of lashes out at all of them as opposed to just direction.
That's correct. And I have a medium that I work with that's very, very good at discerning that. And we had a case not too long ago. We had a young client that was bipolar. And she was medicating to a degree. I had the feeling that she wasn't medicating full time because there would be times where she would just take off in the middle of the night and a couple of days later she'd come back. And she was living with extended family, and she had several children also. So she would take off and...
We talking self-medicated or?
A little bit of both.
Okay, yeah.
And that caused a lot of consternation in the family. It caused a lot of anger issues, a lot of arguments. And the medium came into the house with me, and I didn't tell him anything about this. I took the initial information, and he said, there's this dark cloud that is hanging over the dinner table. And he turned and looked directly at the client and says, you need to stop talking to each other like that. That is bad. It is feeding this thing. And... it was slashing out so badly that the... Sorry?
Jeff, you're breaking up.
Saying, where else do you eat but at the dinner table?
Jeff,
I heard a little bit of that about the dinner table.
Yeah. Jeff, you're breaking up.
There was a lot of cross argument going on at the dinner table, and there was even an event where the client and the mother or the grandmother were getting into it in front of us and arguing. Mm-hmm. And I was doing my best to try to calm things down, and I noticed to the side the medium was backing up and backing away. And after we got out of there and had our dinner afterwards where we compared notes, he says, you didn't see me do that, did you? I said, well, I kind of noticed you backing away. And he said, you didn't see the black thing that merged from the floor between the two of them while they were arguing like that. And the moment you got them to calm down, it went away. And he could see all this psychically. And
that's fascinating that it's an actual... I mean, I know the concept of that, but it's an actual manifestation that people can see.
Yeah, and sometimes if you have psychic ability, you can see it better than others. And I do hear people often on telling me that, oh yeah, I've had this shadow since I was probably young, and I see it from time to time. But when my boyfriend moved in and we started fighting, it really, really started getting visible, and even my boyfriend could see it.
Mm-hmm.
And
It sounds a lot like Paranormal Activity, and it kind of makes me wonder if these people are just really excellent projectionists who can do all of that energy out there. And yeah, that's how they direct their anger. It's very focused.
as in psychology, we call it disassociation.
Mm-hmm.
And if you've undergone trauma as you're younger, or even in your older years, if you've learned to disassociate your emotions, you can manifest this separate entity from you. And since that entity has been created from your negative emotions, it seeks to be fed with those negative emotions. So it will try to charge an atmosphere to the point where you're arguing, or you're depressed, or you're drinking, or you're doing whatever to feed it, because it knows nothing else.
That would make total sense. You know, the kids saying, well, my invisible friend did it. And how many of those are actually not ghosts, but it may be an outward manifestation that the child can see of his own emotions and that confliction. No, honey, we don't act that way. But he needs to project that energy out somehow, so it becomes an imaginary friend.
Mm-hmm. And it could make sense, too, why at a certain age children don't see their imaginary friends anymore, because they've worked through that emotional maturity to the point that they don't
You also
project anymore.
it's like the little blurbs they have on Instagram of people who, kids have an imaginary friend with pigtails, and it turns out that pigtails are actually a hanging rope because that's where someone woman had committed suicide hanging herself on the stairs or whatever.
Oh, yeah. Everything is perception. And I remember in the bipolar case that we were talking about, the children were seeing an entity named Diego. And it was funny to hear the grandmother and the client talk about this thing like it was this menacing, evil thing, Diego. And I'm like, why are you talking about him like that? Because he's a demon. You've heard of Diego. He's a demon. I'm like, no, I have never heard of a demon named Diego. And I got to thinking about it after I was going through my notes. I called back and I said, do your children watch cable television? Well, yeah, they do. I said, do they watch the Cartoon Network? Well, they watch Nickelodeon. I said, do they watch Dora the Explorer? Well, yes, they do. I said, do you know the name of Dora the Explorer's little friend? It's Diego. And Diego is a little boy with brown hair and brown eyes. And that's what the children were reporting as seeing, is this boy with brown hair and brown eyes. Oh. And here they were talking about this thing like it was a demon. And I'm like, no, they're associating what they know from TV and naming their friend what they recognize. And it was quite telling, because the medium who came in and who also witnessed the disparaging energy and the anger issues and stuff, he found two children upstairs, a little girl and a little boy. And the little boy had brown hair and brown eyes. But the family was absolutely adamant this had to be a demon. I mean, they were absolutely adamant they had the conjuring going on in their house. And I said, nobody has the conjuring going on in their house because it didn't really happen. But I mean, I shouldn't say it really didn't happen, but it's been, built upon over all this time. But the movie itself is not really representative of the actual original case either.
Sure.
But because it's not exciting enough.
Oh yeah, well, a lot of people don't know that. All they see, and I've done lectures on based on a true story is basically what I called it, and we've gone through the movies one by one and judged it on the truth meter, based on the original cases and what the movie actually evolved into being, and sometimes even the remakes. It was fascinating to see when they did Amityville Horror. It was based on a novel by Jay Anson. But the second reincarnation of Amityville Horror, based on a true story. It changed.
You mean I can poltergeist? I can't access the afterlife through my closet in the bedroom? I mean,
well, you can always try.
Yeah.
I would advise it.
Jeez, I'm not going to get, people ascending to heaven through my staircase. It's just, I guess that would be a stairway to heaven, but we won't go there.
Oh dear. Yeah, hopefully we're not going to get a whole lot of hate mail on that one. Sorry. But,
I did like the movie, but it just, anytime any of your children ever bug you for a pool, just show them Poltergeist, and they'll never ask you for a backyard pool again.
Or Jaws. Jaws worked for me. But people's perception going into a situation can very well color what they perceive is going on, and as a parapsychologist, you have to be aware of that too. So that's why it's important to know, anthropological things, sociological things, what's their culture represent as paranormal? What does their religion represent, as when it comes to the paranormal? You need to be very much aware of those things when you're going in for a case, because it can very well color their perceptions of what's going on.
Well,
do you also ask? Go ahead.
Oh,
Go ahead.
I was going to say there's a series that just wrapped up its first season called Destination Fear, one of the Travel Channel. Hey, we're all paranormal all the time almost. Where Dakota, the lead investigator who used to work with Zach, would be he decided to conduct what he called a psychological experiment to see how they could work through their fear, and they would go to these famous haunted places. I don't think they went to Waverly. They didn't, or Pottstown, but they did go to like Mansfield and places like that. And all I kept thinking is the one thing they're missing is a control. Somebody like me who doesn't jump out of their skin if something, a penny falls on the floor. And I would love to be in some of these locations. But yeah, like you say, they go in there fully expecting to have the pants scared off of them, and sure enough, what a surprise they do.
Yeah, they do. And that's why I find it really humorous when these people are using this equipment and they go into a haunted location, and whenever that equipment triggers, it's got to be a ghost because they're in a haunted location. But if they took that equipment home and had it happen in their own house, they'd be looking for alternative reasons because obviously their house isn't haunted. But that's a perception issue.
Sleeping in a tent in the yard too, That's it.
Well, is one of the questions that a lot of investigative teams ask people is, how many of these ghost shows on TV do you watch? Do you watch a lot? And are they, if they're going to say, no, I don't watch that sort of stuff on television, then they would have a completely different slant on how to do the investigation.
That's true. And, I would hope an investigation team that's been doing this for a while has a good interviewer that takes the time to do that. Unfortunately, with a lot of investigative teams I've seen around local parts anyway, they don't take the time to do that. They go charging in with the equipment, guns blazing. And they spend very little time talking to the client at all. But that is a very poignant question to ask. And there are so many different ways to answer that question, too. So as a interviewer, you have to be listening for the answers and be willing to deviate from the checklist if need be. Like I've had a case before where I've asked, do you drink? Well, not very often. I said, and if somebody wasn't paying attention, they might glaze over and go to the next question. But I said, well, okay, describe very often. Oh, well, I drink every night before I go to bed, just one glass of wine, 1 to 2 glasses of wine every night. That's supposed to be good for you. And I'm like, what? She had read some story and in a news mag somewhere saying that this was good for heart health to drink wine, but you don't drink 2 glasses of wine every single night.
You're doing lockdown.
Let's hear it for resveratrol. Yeah. Woo.
But when it came down, I dug into that deeper and deeper, and I found out that was the only way she could relax to go to bed at night, because she was alone in the house, and she, things would happen at night, and so she would drink to cope with it. So that's one of the you have to really pay attention to and have a really good checklist to go by, but be willing to deviate and dig deeper on the checklist if you have to.
So as we get into the quarantine and we find people, you have to stay at home, you have to do stuff, they start binge watching the Travel Channel or the poltergeist stuff or whatever, and all of a sudden, all those, because we're starting to get into the warmer season, all of those floor joists start popping, and they start screaming ghost. Or they're so pent up, like we talked about before, with that much energy. And, if my husband cracks his, knuckles one more time, I'm going to scream. Stuff, then, how much of that over a period of now 2 months in some cases, is going to accumulate. And if a psychic would walk into some of these houses right now, would they be bowled over with that much energy, do you think?
They could. I mean, they've already said they've had record amounts of divorce filings because people just are not meant to be in each other's space like that for long periods of time. And relationships are not lasting. They're getting angry with each other on every little thing. They're getting on each other's nerves, and especially if they don't have that release valve to be able to leave the house and walk around. Sometimes you don't. It depends on where you're at. But a lot of that pent-up energy could manifest into a PK situation or a poltergeist situation where things are flying off the shelves, and the first thing they jump to is ghost. Because that's all they know. They're not everybody's familiar with the poltergeist phenomena. So, but and again, that's a perception issue. But I find that sometimes when you binge watching this stuff, it does not take very long.
Sure.
For things to start manifesting.
Yeah. Now here comes a big question then. Once it's starting to manifest and you get that entity, whatever it's called, does it dissipate, or do you have to do something to get it to dissipate?
Well, you have to
stop
stop
being fed.
Yeah, and that's sometimes if they can make that connection by themselves and stop watching it should dissipate on its own, because it's feeding off of that interest, that magnetized interest in the paranormal. And I've had to have that discussion with people in my classes before when they come in and they're taking my apparition cases or my apparition classes or my intro and parapsychology classes, that they're opening the door to whatever may happen, because by your interest alone, you're opening that door and things may start to happen. Or you may just be more apt to realize things are happening.
So let me ask you then, because, if you practice magic or you do any of that sort of thing and it all becomes intent, exactly how much of this is sort of like almost a ritual of a sort where, I'm stuck in this house, I can't stand it, this person is the cause of it, and all this stuff is going in. So you have almost a directed hex towards certain people. Mm-hmm. Does that sound?
Oh, that very well could happen. Yeah. That's what I was talking to Brian about. I was kind of joking with him about it. It's like, I can just hear the scenario right now between the boyfriend and the girlfriend. I can't believe you threw that plate at me after that argument. I didn't throw it at me. Well, who else could it have been? Well, when you start demeaning me like that at a regular basis, it brings out my feelings of insecurity that I had with my over-domineering father, and it happens or comes out as PK outburst. And he's like, what? And she's like, what? Never mind. But that very well could be what happens, is that relationships get tried and triggers can be pulled, and even subconsciously, you may not be aware of it. Sometimes it takes an external person viewing the situation through fresh eyes to realize what's going on. But yeah, it can very well happen.
It could also flavor the entity to a certain degree, could it not? I mean, if you're having all these issues at home and you start binge watching the Travel Channel, and all of a sudden you start labeling everything that's happening around you as demonic, can it become demonic?
I don't know if you can create a demon out of your own thoughts. I mean, you can definitely perceive it.
You can make it nasty.
Yeah. I mean, if you're shedding off negative emotions and feeding this thing with that, it can very well appear demonic. But demonic is a different thing.
Sure. Yeah.
But
I use the term demonic with air quotes here.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I mean, if you're watching a lot of these television shows, they throw around that word loosely all the time.
Yeah.
And even when I talked to Amy Allen a couple of years ago, when I talked to her about using the D word, when she does Dead Files, and she just kind of rolled her eyes at me, and I said, so what does that mean? And she's just like, the producers make me use that word.
Yeah.
And he's like, it's the only thing people can associate with on the mainstream level. So there's so many different manifestations these things can be. But that's what the producers seem to think gets people's juices flowing.
The D word sells.
D words. So, but yeah, people could very well assume something is demonic based on their perception.
Yeah. I think that's absolutely true. Lots of things. And we were talking before this show went on. And I read it in Variety that there is a Bolivian orchestra that's stuck in a German castle, and it's been stuck there for 73 days. And it's a haunted castle.
Uh-huh.
And I'm thinking, here you are.
I get it.
Not only stuck in a foreign country, but you're stuck in a haunted castle. It's the Rheinsberg Palace.
Right.
Outside of Berlin, and not only you're stuck in the castle, which is haunted, but you can't go outside because there's packs of wolves out there. So, all of a sudden now you have the perfect horror trip. And I'm thinking what the mindset is. And I hearken back to, Jeff, help me, what's the name of that movie? It's where they take these guys to a haunted house as a psychological test.
Haunting of Hill House? Or
Hill
13
House,
13 Ghosts?
Well, Hill House. I'm Haunting of Hill House.
Oh,
Haunting
okay.
of Hill House. Oh, yeah.
I think the experiment was more... Oh, that's right. The remake was more experiment.
Yeah, that's all. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you kind of think that way is when you get these people and you automatically set up an event that's almost a trigger. And then all of a sudden you realize, hey, we're stuck here. The house is haunted. What's going to happen, sort of thing.
Right. Yeah. If you don't have the coping mechanism to deal with such things, you're in really, really big trouble. And of course, if you're the one setting up the triggers, you're the fall guy person for that. Yeah, that's evil. That's just mean to set somebody up like that. I mean, obviously, Hill House is meant to be like that. But, I remember being, when I docented out at Gettysburg, and I was in charge of the house we were at. We were having it just went right out the window. Reenactment. So I was the one on premises there watching after all these reenactors outside the house. Well, at night, I locked the door, and I go to bed in the house by myself. I had all sorts of things happen in that house, and I couldn't leave. I was responsible for all these people. I couldn't leave. So I had to stand up to the things that were there and basically make them back off, but not everybody has those skills. So I was lucky in that sense that I did, but I did think as I was going to bed, I was like, what if these people didn't? What if we had people staying here at the house? And I guess I had the director tell me before that he's come and taken people out of the house at night because it's gotten that active.
Wow.
And the volunteers just couldn't handle it.
Now, is that activity from real spirits or?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Oh, yes. It was battlefield activity, definitely. It was definitely soldiers. I mean, you could hear the hard soul brogans on the hardwood coming up the stairs.
Oh, wow.
And the lights on the hallway were on, and those footsteps stopped at my doorframe, and there was nobody standing there.
So is that, I don't want to say proof, but does that fit into the category of real spirits?
Well, it's definitely experiential. I mean, you can call that experiential evidence.
Okay.
Obviously, having more than one person there would have been advantageous than just me. But yeah, experiential evidence can be valuable once added to other things. So if you have an experience, because you can have a psychic experience that cannot be registered by any other device.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's a little harder to prove to someone else. So if your end goal is to prove it to someone else, that may not be enough.
Very true. Yeah. And it's interesting when we start talking about this, but, you know, we're all stuck and we think we're stuck in maybe a haunted house because it's quarantined and we can't get out. We have to reverse that in a way and look at it from the standpoint of, are the ghosts in quarantine? They can't get out and they have to suffer through live people showing up?
Oh, yeah, I often think about that. I was reading the New York Times article, and I thought about that. It's just like some of the people that were in quarantine actually found the activity calming because someone else was there. And so they had, you know, they got into conversations with what was there, and it made them feel better.
We don't know how well that works out in horror movies.
That always works well.
Yeah, totally.
You know, in the short term, it can help you work through things. But in some cases, I often wonder that, you know, the activity is always there, but it's never really presented itself to the people that live there because, you know, face it, I mean, everybody's the same way. When they're in a house and they're in the rush to go to work in the morning and they hear a sound, they're more likely to brush it off in the effect of bustling off to work than to really analyzing it. So it isn't until you're locked within the four walls that you can really sit there and analyze it and go, oh, well, maybe those noises I've been hearing for the last year and a half that I've lived here weren't just the neighbors next door, and oh yeah, there's footsteps upstairs, and that's right, the upstairs unit's vacant. I forgot about that. You know, the little things you recognize when you're locked up in your own four walls for a long time. There's a lot of things that the brain just dismisses.
Sure. But also, like I said, you know, we're stuck here. Eventually, we'll be able to get out. And it's like having those unwanted house guests that you can't get rid of. And we have to ask ourselves on some of these ghost tours, etc. Are we the unwanted house guests? And should we be conducting ourselves in a little bit more appropriate manner, walking in?
Yeah, and absolutely. And I've been in enough historical locations and volunteered enough that I've had to put my 2 cents in to say, hey, you know what, you really shouldn't be acting like that. And even when I started volunteering at the historical location where I was, they were talking about a death that had occurred in the house that the FBI Quantico had come in and done a thorough examination of the house from stem to stern and basically found these, mortician wax imprints on the floor, the blood on the stains on the floor. They've analyzed it all. And so they made those quote unquote dead people part of the regular tour. And before they knew it, one location where they always talked about this imprint in the floor, they were having trouble with that room. The drapes were being pulled down. Things were being thrown around the room. They would come in the morning and furniture would be upset. Things would be knocked off the wall. And when I came in and started volunteering, I'm like, wait a minute, you're making this part of the tour? Well, yeah. Well, of course he's upset. You're talking about him like he's not here. He is here. And they just looked at me dumbfounded.
And the moment I said that, the activity in the next room started getting louder. You could hear a male voice talking or trying to talk. And I'm like, see? He's in the next room. Because we went in there and there's nobody there. And, it's a pretty large acreage, so you're not going to have people wandering around the house unnoticed. And so I helped out a little bit with that situation and helped clarify the energy in the house there. And I asked them, I said, please be careful about how often you talk about that, because it's upsetting. They are here. They died here. They're still working through how they died here. And to talk about them like that is very upsetting. And they're like, oh, okay. Now that worked with some of the people that were doing the tours, and some of the other people, no, we're just going to go ahead and do this same old. I said, well, okay. There's only so much you can do.
It is sad.
Yeah.
And we sort of talk about, well, I guess on a lot of ghost tours, it would be the exact same thing. Yes. It would be like gossiping in front of your face to somebody on the other side, and how we present information about someone will dictate how the activity is going to take itself. Yeah. Are they going to bring you fresh flowers, or are they going to throw pots and pans at you?
Right, yeah. And a lot of these locations that are commercially advertising themselves to be haunted, like Posttown and Waverly Hills, the stories that you get out of those places are not positive ones. You're talking about the nurse that hung herself for being pregnant in the upper floors of the Waverly Hills. The child that fell down the stairs and broke their neck at the school. You're, by saying those stories over and over and over again, you're making the entity relive that tragedy over and over and over again. And whether you want to call a dead person still having a psyche, it can only take that so much before it starts acting out. And it's not going to like it. And it's kind of abuse in a way that we would never do to a living person.
Sure.
If a woman was violated, and you hear that on a lot of the ghost tours, oh, there was a woman here, she was, and the investigators go through and, tell us who did it, who did this to you, what did he do to you, blah, 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 blah. We would never do that to a victim. It would be inhuman.
So
to a dead person,
it's worse than regular provoking.
Absolutely.
I got a question in the chat room. The Spooktacular wanted to know, is the places that you're talking about able to be visited?
No. And there are historical locations that do not promote that kind of thing, especially paranormal wise. Not all of them are happy to entertain that. This location, obviously, I will not give its name because they're not into that sort of thing. But the experiences are definitely worth noting because it does help understanding.
So let's talk a bit about the other spots too, because like the Allegheny Lunatic Asylum, for example, right, where you have patients that were not that comfortable with reality to begin with, and may not be able to process the death process as well.
Yeah.
And you go in and start talking about them. That's going to bring on a whole different type of haunting, would it not?
It could. I mean, they could become attracted to you because you're paying attention to them. And that may be something that they're craving. And considering the mindset they may still be in, you're not really going to want that. They may do things to you or act out in certain ways that a person who was in an asylum might do. And so you have to be careful how you interact with entities like that. And I won't go to asylums. I won't go to prisons because I really don't go to those places in life because those people are in a precarious mental balance. They're not going to be much better in death. So I just don't go there. But you do hear, though, sometimes when mediums walk through those locations that the nursing staff comes back. The nursing staff's still there. They're still attending to the patients like it was their regular job. And you almost have to wonder if those nurses or those orderlies or those doctors that when they passed over realized they still had work to do when they came back to help those people try to find a way to transition.
Well, now, when you go into some of these places, it's closed and totally run down, like nursing homes and stuff like that. Do you think that the spirits and of the ones that's passed are still living in that time period, and that's why they're still there doing their job?
It could be that too. It depends on how aware they are when they passed over. I mean, if they did transition and became universally aware, what do you want to call it? You want to call it heaven? You want to call it, the next level? What do you want to call it? And they become universally aware. They can come back and do jobs. They will get assignments to do things down here. And they're very much aware that they're dead. They're very much aware of what's happened to them and why their life was the way it was, but they might come down and help. There might be other ones, too, that were so gravitated to that location day in and day out, 24 hours a day. When they die, that may be all they know. And they might return to the place.
Do you think that they see it as the way it was then, not all run down and closed? I mean, it's just like they're still going to patients' rooms and waiting on them. So I would assume that they see it in that time period.
Yeah, if they're not universally aware, then they may see it just the way they were when they died. It may not change. And there's been some interesting thoughts about that in regards to transitioning out of body, what that energy state might consist of. And there's been some talk about, well, if an energy is zero mass, it has no choice but then to travel at the speed of light. Once you become closer to the speed of light, time stops for you. Time doesn't exist anymore. Mm-hmm. So if you decide that you're going to stay here in that state, you may not be aware of time changing for you. Just like those poor guys out at Gettysburg. They still think it's July 1863. And to us, that's unfathomable because it's been over 150 years.
Right.
But to them, time does not exist.
Right.
And en masse, they have decided their reality is this. They have more than just one person reinforcing that. Because I've been out there on the field and I've talked to some of these entities, and somebody else will jump in and talk and say, don't listen to her. She's lying. She's making it up. She's crazy. Don't listen to her. You know what our reality is. We got to get back to the line. We got fighting to do. And so you have multiple consciousnesses enforcing the rules of that reality because they died en masse. So me coming in and telling them that the war is over, of course they're going to look at me like I'm crazy because they have all their buddies there standing right next to them with their guns loaded saying, hey, come on, we got to go.
Wow.
So, yeah, there's only so much I know I can do when I go to a location like that. If I'm dealing with an entity one-on-one that wants to talk to me, some of them become aware when I start talking. They might already have some telltale signs or some things that they've noticed that, man, well, you know what, maybe my buddies don't know what they're talking about. I have noticed those carriages out on the road there without horses, and I don't understand why they don't have horses attached to them.
Wow.
You got all these roads running through with cars. Or they'll see these women walking around without skirts on.
Darcy, you're basically describing also the Buddhist experience, where when you start meditating for long periods, you're going to start looking at, well, what is this reality? Is this reality real? And who's making it that way? So it's fascinating what you're talking about.
All right.
Well, and
we're going to go ahead and take a quick break. Be about 4 or 5 minutes. Darcy, just remember your mic is live, so don't go hollering and jumping up and down dancing. And we'll be back in about 4 or 5 minutes. So I guess
I'm still connected.
Jeff, you get to take us out.
Yeah, you're listening to the Paranormal View on para-x.com with hosts Henry Foister, Ceiling Cat, Barbara Duncan, and myself, Jeffrey Gould, with tonight's returning guest, Darcy McGrath. So stay tuned for more of the Paranormal View after the break.
Whether you're listening at home, at work, or anywhere, thanks for making Para-X part of your day. Your source for everything paranormal, Para-X.
And welcome back, everybody, right here to the Paranormal View on the Para-X Radio Network. I want to thank everyone for being here tonight. Hope you're enjoying the show. We have with us Barbara Duncan.
I am still here.
And we got Jeffrey Gould.
Hello.
Oh, he is here. And we got our great guest, Darcy McGrath.
Hello.
All right. So, was you talking about something before we went to break, Barbara?
I was just commenting on the concept of what Darcy is talking about, awareness of your surroundings and where you are consciously in the universe. And it sounded a lot like Buddhist philosophy, which is, are we really here? And where our consciousness expands to, which falls back into parapsychology. So.
Yeah, I have found a lot of parallels in Buddhist principle in regards to consciousness. And how even the Tibetan Book of the Dead, one of the rituals that they do at the time of death is to coax the person who's passing away to ascend to the highest level possible. You know, don't be distracted by anyone trying to talk to you. Don't be distracted by loved ones. Go to the highest and the best. And I always thought that was just fascinating that they built that into the death process. And I think that would very greatly shape your afterlife as to which level you decided to settle for when you die. So, yeah.
Very much so. And it's interesting, the correlations, and I don't even want to fathom, I can't remember how old the Tibetan Book of the Dead is either, but the fact that it is ingrained into that philosophy is fascinating to me, just as the Hindu philosophy and religion also coincides with a lot of quantum physics and astrophysics that we're learning about today.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think there's a little bit of truth in all of the religious disciplines. It might be using different verbiage, but one of the exciting opportunities, I got to have a conversation with Andy Kopic, who developed the full spectrum camera. He's a graduate of quantum thermodynamics from MIT. And his significant other was there at a conference with him, and I'm drawing a blank, and maybe you guys have probably a better idea who this is than I do. He was a member of the Exorcist organization associated with the Vatican. And he would oftentimes go to paranormal conventions warning people about the evils of what they were doing. And I'm drawing a blank. I think he had his own television show for a while, too. The Exorcist Files, I think it was.
I can't remember.
The
Exorcist Files?
Yeah.
A lot of the major Bible thumpers are all don't talk to demons, you're just going to, bring in everything terrible and open a door you can't close kind of thing, so...
Oh, yeah. Well, he was at one of the conventions that Andy was at, and the two of them ended off in a corner of the room together.
Ooh.
And Michelle, who was his significant other, walked in on them having a very loud and animated discussion, and she was afraid they were fighting. No, they were excited because what the Vatican exorcist representative, the language he was using, Andy could find correlating scientific language that would verify what he was saying as far as the exorcism process and what was experienced in the exorcism process. And Andy would say, oh, in quantum physics, we call it this, that, da, 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 da. And so, here Michelle walked in on this conversation, thinking she was going to have to break up a fight. And it turned out that they were just very excited. But they were just using different language.
Sure.
Do you did you watch a TV series that ran this past season called Evil?
Yes,
Just
I
the word
did.
Evil. I love that show.
I did too. And I actually know people from both sides of the field in that. You know, I have a friend of mine who's very, very into the Vatican and the workings of it and the evolution that they're going through right now. And a lot of that is pretty accurately represented in that series.
Yeah, but the last two episodes too, when the Goat Man showed up, was like, wait, what?
Oh yeah.
Where you didn't realize the I can't remember his name. The actor who's been the antagonist. We just thought he was on his own, but he's
right.
like, he's got his own little Satan as his therapist.
right. Oh, I thought that was brilliant. Yeah. So there were a lot of telltale things in there that I thought were fascinating, especially the part about the lucid dreaming.
Oh yeah.
And I had just been studying Robert Stevenson and some of the other experts on lucid dreaming, and when I started watching that show, I'm like, you know what? If she just did this in her lucid dream, she'd be able to figure it out. The very next episode, boom, they jumped right into lucid dreaming, and I'm like, oh, that's great.
The writing on the ceiling. You mean the writing
yes.
on the ceiling? Yeah.
Yes,
With
and
George.
having the string on her finger, or the string on her wrist.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah. So that's straight out of the playbook for lucid dreaming. So I was just like, and I've had that happen to me.
Yeah. And she was able to expel George pretty easily that way.
Yeah. No, I thought it was brilliant. I actually put that on my parapsychology or paranormal site because I was like, this is brilliant. You got to see this. I put that out there. But yeah, I've had that happen in lucid dreaming too, where I'll be sitting there and I'll be trying to type something on the computer, and I'll type it over and over and over again. It's just gobbledygook and gobbledygook and gobbledygook. I'm like, I know I'm typing it right. Why the heck? I'm like, oh, I'm dreaming. From the moment I realized I was dreaming, of course I woke up. Like, dang it.
That's what always annoys me. The few times I realize I think I'm dreaming. Ding, either wake up or the dream says, hey, look over here. And you look over there and you forget that you're dreaming again.
Oh, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And
like the dream
that goes back to
distracts you.
I've got a question again from the chat room. It's from Tabby Cat. And she wants to know, what has been your most profound paranormal experience you've had?
Oh, wow. Well, I've had to say the last several of them I've had at Gettysburg were just amazing in that they were so physical and so undeniably there. I mean, I've had episodes where I've captured stuff on camera, I've captured stuff on the audio before, but to actually have an audio phenomenon happening right there in front of me, and, you can't see anything, but you can talk to it, and it responds to your voice. And that was just really it was one of my first times I've actually had a very interactive episode where I've seen cause and effect. So, I mean, I know when that whoever it was came to my door, and he was going to come in, and I'm like, I had to hold my ground. I was the only one in the house. Everybody else was outside. They were asleep. So I just basically had to stand my ground and say, not in a lady's bedroom, you don't.
Huh.
And the footsteps stopped, and you could hear this rocking of the floorboards, like somebody was rocking on their heels, like they weren't quite sure what to do. And then they started pacing up and down the hallway. You could hear the footsteps, kind of like agitated that they couldn't come in.
Huh.
And so fortunately enough, he understood boundaries, and he listened to me.
And he was waiting for instructions. Like, no one's ever stood up to me before. What?
Well, either that or he really wanted to talk to me, and he was annoyed that I put him off.
Well, this brings up a good question, Darcy. Do you, when you go on investigations or into a client's house after something like this, would you counsel them to say, you need to set a boundary here? No, you can't come into my bedroom. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, what you allow will continue. That's an old saying from way back when, but it's still very prominent today. And that's why you have problems with bullies today, is that you fall into this victimized mentality and you let the bully walk all over you. It's the same here. You have this entity in your house. This is your house. You have every right to set your boundaries for yourself. Now, you don't have the right to threaten them or scream and yell obscenities at them or challenge them. If you do that, then you're asking for a fight. But you have every right to set boundaries for yourself. And that's something I have actually learned doing EVP sessions too. I've heard of negative entities coming into a location, and it shows up on the recorder. And you hear the other entities that are in that location fending them off with that very verbiage. Do not touch me. Leave me alone. And they are setting their boundaries. And it's like, that's something we got to learn to do. And for some people, that's very hard because they never learned to do it. Even in adulthood, they haven't learned to do it.
Now,
well, that's one of the things I found about, like, the Travel Channel, is there's a lot of victimization that seems to happen on a lot of these shows.
Yes.
And there needs to be a trend away from that somehow.
Yeah.
But they don't show a lot of resolution.
No, they don't have a lot of resolution, and that's the sad part about it, because I know a lot of paranormal investigators, when they get their start, they're learning from those shows. And those shows don't carry the whole case through. Now, they might actually have resolution on those cases. They just don't show it because it doesn't make good television. The producers just think it's boring. I'm never going to show that stuff. Ghost Hunters talked about that a couple times, where they've done things outside the parameters of the episode that are not aired.
right.
But they've offered a resolution for the client in such a way, but it's because of the parameters set for the show and the scope set for the show. They don't want to get too much into religion. They don't want to get too much into spirituality. And so those things are done off camera.
Now,
and
we
even with
talked-
media.
Yeah, we talked about that before. It's that, and somehow when you investigate a noise in the middle of the night, you don't think to turn the light on.
No.
And I'm just going, come on, guys, let's make it a little bit more realistic, because people are watching this from, like I said, binge watching during quarantine, and they start to see things happening around the house, and they look at TV and they see somebody scared half to death, no resolution. They're walking down and see things in the middle of the night because they're not turning the light on. And they just run out of the house in the middle of the night and never go back.
Yeah, their imagination that gets the better of them. And I mean, how many times have we woken up in the middle of the night and we've seen a silhouette in the window and we're completely freaking out? And then we turn on the light and find out, the dress we hung up in the window there looked like a person was standing there. But of course, you turn the light, it illuminates that, But people, because they see these television shows, think they need to wander around in the dark. And I just laugh at that, because I've investigated day or night. If a place is haunted, it's haunted 24/7. It's not going to wait till the lights go out and then come out. No, there is a psychological process that happens when you sleep. I should say a neurological process that happens when you sleep.
Sure.
That when you go through several cycles during the night, and usually around 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, depending on what time you went to bed. It typically happens between 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. You're going to wake up. Whether or not you recall waking up, you will wake up. And that's usually when people are reporting to me that they have experiences, is because they've woken up and then they've forgotten they've woken up. Or they've woken up but not quite fully. And that's when you can actually have either waking dreams, or you might have a psychic episode, because your brain chemistry is in that mapped state that most mediums are in to receive that information at that point in time in your sleep cycle. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, people talk about the witching hour and, the dead time and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, it sounds dramatic and everything. And if you watch too much TV, you might actually buy into that. But as far as your neurological programming is concerned, when it comes to sleeping, you're going to be more receptive to things happening at that time of the day, because you're more or less half asleep, half awake.
Yeah, I've never bought into that stuff, really.
Yeah, and there's no reason to be investigating from 10 o'clock at night till 6 o'clock in the morning. There's no reason. No. Not unless you have an addiction problem with Red Bull.
Oh, well,
That's very true.
Now I know.
But also,
I've
it's. I'm sorry if you see a black mass in your hallway in the middle of the night and you turn the light on. If the black mass is still there, then you have a haunting. If not, it could be a number of shadow things.
Oh,
But
yeah.
I don't buy the turning off the lights.
Yeah, when you're coming awake, you're just coming to the point of between sleep and awake. That's when I have a lot of my psychic experiences. I pay attention to those, and I make a note of it, and then I running it through my rational filter after that, I can decide whether or not it was something prominent or not. But sometimes you can have those waking dream states where your body is still paralyzed. The chemistry or chemical running through the body hasn't worn off yet, and you're still stuck.
Right.
And you can have a waking dream and not even really realize you're having a waking dream.
Now, I have been with mediums before, and it's really
Believe them.
well. It's really interesting because supposedly there was a little girl in this house, and me, her, and guy from Port, Mark, was sitting in the front looking down the hall, and I'm just asking questions, and everything, and all of a sudden the medium says, she's standing right in front of you. I said, oh, okay, let me get my camera here and see if I can take a picture. And a few seconds, Mark says, honey, can Henry take your picture? And we get the EVP. I'm smiling. Now, you have a medium telling you that she's there, and then you ask a question and you get an answer. She said something else too later on when I was still trying to talk with her. They said, well, she's not here because there was a dark entity in the house and she didn't care for it. So she was back in the back of the house hiding. Well, I had recorders all over. And when they said that, the recorder picks up her saying, hiding. So, I mean, when you're getting interaction like that, is that paranormal then?
I like to see it in patterns of 3 than just 2. So, I mean, if you got that EVP and you had the medium saying something, and then you took the photograph and there was something there.
Well, I didn't get nothing on a photograph.
Torso apparition standing there, but because the hiding part of it could be a projection from the medium. The medium could be thinking it, and she can infect the equipment as well. So you got to be careful about that sort of thing. And Loyd turned me onto that, and I never really thought much about it either. But yeah, PK wise, a medium could project that, and it could end up on the equipment that way. But if you have a third thing, like the cam, you have the medium, you have the audio, you have the camera, you have the medium, you have the audio, you have a video. Yeah, that kind of narrows down the
I only took
culprits of.
I only took 1 or 2 pictures, but there was nothing on the pictures. So.
Oh, bummer. Well, that trifecta is hard to get.
Yeah.
It really is hard to get. But yeah, you just have to keep that in the back of your mind that the living can impact equipment.
Yeah.
So
and I'm also wondering, because you're talking about the IR camera and how much more beneficial it would be in paranormal investigation than just a standard camera is. And I believe that.
Yeah, it can be. You're seeing a different spectrum that the eye can't see.
Right.
So you got a piece of equipment that's able to see a spectrum of light that we can't see, and the full spectrum camera too. And I've asked Andy about that. I said, it's nice that you have this full spectrum camera that sees all the way from ultraviolet through visible light to IR, but have you been able to develop a camera that just sees UV? And he says, oh, I've never tried that. I said, that would rule a lot of other things out too, as to what frequency is this entity appearing in. Because he's had some interesting stuff come out of his camera where things will look like a shadow of a person. You can make out the clothing and everything. It's obviously somebody wearing clothes from a different time sitting there. But then he'll have other pictures that he'll take with the camera that are bright flashes of this violet color. And that's obviously in a different part of the spectrum than this other. So I said, could this darker energy be more earthbound, type, person? And then the UV flash, probably from a higher register, being from higher realms or more evolved state. He goes, I don't know. I've just never really tried that. So it's kind of frustrating to see some of this new technology being carried so willy-nilly into the field, but nobody's really bothering to scientifically, and investigate with it. They just kind of see what they're doing on TV with it, and that's about as far as they take it. But those are just the questions as a researcher I ask. Nobody else is not caring about that.
Well, now, you sent us an article about paranormal has increased during the COVID lockdown. Did you read all of it? What was some of the most interesting stories that was in there?
Well, as we were talking about before break, one of them was actually talking about how that she realized the activity was there and she was making friends with it. And it actually gave her peace. It didn't scare her. It gave her peace. And then sometimes there would be people that were staying at a vacation home. They got away. And they were staying at an Airbnb somewhere. And they had an experience, but because they'd never had an experience before, they couldn't tell whether what they saw was a residual or something interactive. Because it was there and then it was gone. But that's just it when you're dealing with these people that have never had an experience before. Not, really thinking to ask those questions. But those are. I like the one where the lady was actually making friends with the entity in the apartment. That was pretty cool. She felt less lonely that way. And I'm like, well, good for you. I'm sure the entity felt less lonely too.
Well, it's an interesting coping mechanism, and probably a lot healthier one to be able to get along with something that's there, instead of, again, going back to Sports Ed channel, that everything is that goes bump in the night is demonic. And it could just be, hey, it's just a roommate you didn't know you had.
Yeah, right. And it's probably been there all that time. It's just waiting for you to pay attention to it.
And they're really behind in their rent.
That's right.
Yeah, if you could only get them to pay rent, it would be great.
Yeah.
Yeah, that rent in New York is not anything to sneeze at. Jeez.
Well, the house that we lived in.
Of course, there was the one about the two roommates that had the apartment, and they heard the footsteps upstairs, and they suddenly realized, oh, that's right, that apartment's vacant. Where are those footsteps coming from? They actually had enough time to actually pay attention to the sounds going on around them and going, oh,
well,
okay.
Do you think that's the way it is now or has been with people actually locked down and not going places? They're paying more attention?
They're definitely aware of the sounds around them than they were before. I believe that when you're going through the rigors of the regular life, having to grab that cup of coffee and grab that bagel and run out the door, and you hear something and you just kind of dismiss it and you're on your way. And then you come back at 4:30, then you're grabbing your coat and you're out to the bar, or you're always go. You don't pay attention to that stuff, but it's kind of like all the cat memes we see on Facebook. I really like the one where the person's got the chalk in her hand and she's marked off like 29 days in quarantine, and the cat's looking up at her saying, "I lost track." It's like the cat's always been that way, so it's no big deal to her.
Yeah, I'm sure that the pets are probably hollering, I'm ready for these people to go back to work.
Oh, that's right. Don't you have some place to be? The first week I was here, I was like, I swear that's what the cats were doing. They were looking at me like, why are you still here?
Yeah.
You're supposed to be gone.
But it's going to be interesting when these attractions that are primarily paranormal investigation based, places like Waverly Hills, where there hasn't been any attendance whatsoever, I don't know if you'd expect it to die down because there's less energy there for them to feed off of, or it's going to be absolutely massive because, hey, we can finally come out and play.
Yeah, well, that's true. Or they might get agitated that you come back. It's like, we finally had the place to ourselves. Now you come back with the stick again. Great.
I just how it ticked off. I thought we got rid of these people. Now they're back. It's going to be interesting to see what happens once these investigations start up again.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I like going to these locations with the mindset that I am a guest there, and I'd like to find a way to interact with them in a positive manner. I know when I went to Ashmore Estates in Mattoon, Illinois, I went there a couple of times. I went there with my recorder, and I picked out period-style dance music that they would dance to, that they might have parties to. And I would play that. And we had some situations where the music on my phone would rapidly change. It would scroll through my playlist and start picking out its own music because it was a new toy. It's something they hadn't seen before. Wow. That was really fascinating to see.
Absolutely.
I got another question from the chat room. It's from Tabby Cat. And she wants to know, what is your take on psychometry? And she said her reason for asking is because while you were together in Gettysburg, she had no idea that a building had been rebuilt, yet she sensed that the rocks were all wrong.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's a very real thing. Everything, if you look at quantum physics, everything vibrates at a frequency. Everything, even the rocks. So the fact that a psychic might be able to pick up on that vibration, sure. And I've got some good friends of mine that are, and a lot of people that have psychic ability sometimes have more than one ability. They might be a clairvoyant and a medium. They might be a clairvoyant and a psychometric reader and something else. So it's not uncommon for somebody to have more than one ability or to pick up energy in different ways.
So since you've been
to that effect, it's interesting if you have an object which vibrates on a certain frequency and it comes into contact with something else in your house that operates off of a different frequency and they're not compatible. That could also cause a lot of disjointedness in the house, wouldn't you think?
Oh, sure. Well, yeah, that's why we see a lot of times that the televisions will sometimes go wonky, or the radios might act out, or the lights might act up. It's the energy field of the entity. They may not even be doing it intentionally. They may just their field might be coming into contact with something else, causing a distortion. And
I often wonder. Go ahead. Oh, I was just going to say, I often wonder if that's what people bringing home antiques might find, is that it has a completely different vibration. They might think, this antique has an attachment to it, when in fact it's just been in the possession of somebody who had a different vibration than you, and it simply just doesn't quite work in your house.
Oh, they might be they might have psychometric ability and not even know it. And this is the first time they've come into contact with something with a strong energy field. And they're like, oh, this is haunted or whatever it is. In actuality, they're just picking up on that energy for the first time because they can. So that's what I find out with a lot of people that are mediums, is that they don't know they're a medium until the ghost tells them they are.
Congratulations, here's your certificate.
So
yeah,
since being quarantined, have you noticed any activity in your house?
I've had some come and go. I tend to keep a fairly, quote unquote, clean house. I have my boundaries set up, and I have entities that I work with me to make sure that the stuff stays out. But on occasion, when emotions get high, and over the last couple of weeks, we've seen it globally get high. Sometimes you attract attention. And you might need some help clearing it out, or you might have to set your boundaries again and tell it to get out. But yeah, you're in a very intense, emotional, passionate energy right now, whether it's with the quarantine or the social government upheaval, or worries about the super volcano blowing up, or the murder hornets, or like you pick your poison. If you have entities out there that are going to feed off of anxiety, this is a prime hunting environment for them. So if you're not paying attention to the energy going on around you, you could really fall victim to that.
Mm-hmm. And I'm sure that there's some pretty warped, there's warped people out there too, but warped spirits that are just going to go, ooh, that tastes good.
Yeah, absolutely.
I guess they're going to go to freaked out people. Yeah.
Okay,
Sometimes they can be discarnate. Sometimes they can just be energy looking for a home. But yeah.
I got another question from the chat room from Sherry. She wants to know what you think about ascension into a higher spiritual role and vibration, and its effect on gifts one exhibits.
Oh, it can definitely change who you have working with you. I've seen before with mediums that are working in a very altruistic manner, and their gifts get better, but more refined. But then there's other mediums that slip and fall for monetary gain or attention or whatever it is, and their guidance seems to slip. And their readings aren't as good as they used to be. They're not as sharp as they used to be, or they're not positive as they used to be. So definitely, following your and adhering to your spiritual practice, especially if they're positive, are going to improve your gifts and your abilities, and your intuition as well, and where that might lead you.
Okay.
I don't know if I answered everything, did I?
No, you're good. I think that was it. So, where's the place that you've actually got the most activity at?
Oh, definitely Gettysburg. Anybody that says that Gettysburg is not the most haunted place on earth hasn't been there yet. And that was the funny thing, is that when I started teaching my parapsychology classes, I came across, a friend of the show, Craig Rubb, came across his infrared, his famous shot from Warren Monument, and it was copyrighted with his name on it, and I wasn't going to use it without permission, so I contacted him. And that's when he was saying, hey, you know what, you should, you come out here, look me up. And so when I got the opportunity, my dad retired, he had extra frequent flyer points, and my brother was going to Jamaica, and I'm like, I'm going to Gettysburg. And they're like, what?
Huh.
I'm definitely going to Gettysburg. If I get the chance, I'm going. So, but yeah, even when you start driving into the edge of town, you just feel the energy like I've never felt anywhere before.
You can tell.
And,
yeah.
You can definitely tell. And I've had so many interesting experiences there. Not always positive, but definitely life-changing experiences there. And one of my favorites that I had was I was working on a remote viewing missing persons case when I went out to do some volunteering, and I didn't tell anybody I was going. So I was still talking with the medium on Facebook. And I'm at the historic location, and he's like, can I call you? I said, sure, go ahead. And so he called me. He says, he was an anesthesiologist that worked in a hospital in Phoenix. But he was also a very good medium and came from a long line of Quilandero, which is Hispanic holy people. And he's just like, I am here in the hospital in my office, and I feel like I'm talking to you in a hospital. And like, please continue. And so he literally walked me step by step through the house. He says, you walk through the living room, you turn to the left, and there's a display case right there. And he said, there are human remains in that display case that need to be dealt with immediately. And I was shocked. Because several of the people that used to do metal detecting parties back in the 90s when the property used to be private had returned artifacts to us through the mail saying, we didn't realize at the time when we did all this that this, these things don't belong to us. They belong to the museum. They should be given back to you. And so they were put in the display case. And I noticed that there were some bone fragments in there. And considering the place used to be a field hospital where they did amputations and everything there, and it's like, how do we know that those bones aren't human? And no. The director was absolutely positive. These were from the butcher's house out back, and they're human, or they're not human, they're animal. And the medium's like, absolutely not. Those are human. They need to be buried.
Huh.
And it's like, there's no way he could have possibly known that. And he says, oh, and then when you hang a left from there, there's a staircase that goes up the stairs. I said, yeah. He says, there's a lady up there in the master bedroom that's not very happy about her curtains. And it was so hilarious because the volunteer coordinator was there with me in the room. And I laughed, and she's like, what's so funny? And I turned to her and I said, remember the curtains that kept getting ripped down? She goes, yep. He says, he's telling you. I said, I told you that. I said, the lady of the house doesn't like those curtains up there, and he just laughed at me. He's telling me the same thing.
Had he ever been to Gettysburg?
He'd never been. He was from the Dominican Republic.
Oh, huh.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, he got his visa, and he was practicing medicine in Phoenix. So even when he was talking to me about, he says, I'm seeing guns on the property, big guns. And they have big wheels on the side. Do they have guns out there like that? Because the guns that we have in the Dominican Republic have these little carts with wheels on them. I'm like, oh, you mean like on the wooden sailing ship? He goes, oh, yeah, that's where we have cannons. But this guy is telling me this is how they move the guns around. And I'm like, yeah. And he said, there are 3 guns on the property, 2 that belong, and then 1 that does not belong. And we had just found the day before, when we were clearing brush, 2 artillery divots, or depressions in the ground where they had cut out sections of the land to mount the cannons during battle. We just found those the day before.
Huh. Wow.
And I turned to the voluntary coordinator. I said, I don't understand. The 3rd that doesn't belong. And she laughed, and she said, the garage up there next to where we cleared the brush? I said, yeah. That's where the reenactment cannon is. It's a replica.
Huh.
I had no idea that was even there.
Wow.
So, and that's one of those things as a parapsychologist you kind of weed through and think about, because he wasn't reading my mind because I didn't have that information.
Sure.
And so, yeah, he's obviously picking it up from somewhere else. And the bone thing, I mean, obviously he was the one telling me they were human. I didn't know.
So how did he know that you was in Gettysburg?
He didn't.
Well, how did he get a hold of you to call you? I mean,
He called me on Facebook phone.
It's called cell phone.
Wow.
It's interesting you're bringing up battlefields, and today is D-Day. And
Yes, it is.
so one would think that Normandy also would be a place that is packed, although I think it's a national monument, and I'm not sure how much visiting you can do there.
Oh, you probably could visit it as a citizen doing paranormal investigations. I'd be wondering if they would consider that in good taste. I don't know.
Probably not, yeah.
No, but yeah. My grandfather landed on the beach a couple days after D-Day. He remembered seeing the guns and the helmets on the beach.
Wow.
When he came off the boat. And so that was, I saw that the other day on Facebook. I'm like, yeah, that's right, it is.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Fascinating.
Yeah. No, I'm sure there's probably quite a bit of paranormal activity over there if one were to look.
One would think there would have to be.
The difficulty I would find, though, being an investigator or a medium over there, is that Europe is so old.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, what layer of history are you pulling up when you're feeling that energy there? And we had that problem in Gettysburg, too, when I was wandering around and with other people, that I was getting energy or actually feedback from different periods of time. Not just the Civil War. I mean, we go to Gettysburg thinking Civil War,
Right.
Sure.
But there was somebody there that was probably from around the 1900s, because they were listing family names within Gettysburg. But it didn't sound like they were attached to the battle in any way.
That's very true. It makes you kind of wonder what a sensitive archaeologist would be going through at any one time.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You're handling objects that sometimes could be thousands of years old, and exactly what you would pick up in that.
Oh yeah, I had a friend of mine contact me and said, "Oh my gosh, I need you to help me." I said, "What's going on?" We're dealing with Holocaust artifacts. What? I need help. I'm touching these things, and she's a medium anyway. And I said, "You need a grounding stone. You need to go outside, either get a pouch of dirt out there, or get a stone from out there." And hold that at the same time as you're going through the archive, because you're going to be picking up on a lot of stuff by touching those things. And she's like, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe I forgot about that." Yeah, you're right.
Huh.
So yeah.
when are you going back to Gettysburg?
2 weeks.
In 2 weeks, you lucky.
Well, I don't know how lucky I am. We'll see how it is out there. Things are strange right now.
Well, last time I talked to Craig, he said that he had taken private tours out on the battlefield, and he said they were just going crazy getting stuff because nobody had been out there for a long time, and it's like the people out there was anxious to actually interact and talk. So,
oh, wow.
So as far as everything else being opened up, I have no idea how much is actually opened up there yet.
Yeah, I'm disappointed. A couple of my friends are not going to be in town. I do have a friend of mine that's out at the seminary, hoping to get a walk around there, have him show me around. But yeah, I haven't really talked to him about my parapsychology part. We'll see how he feels about that, because he's definitely going to be a pastor.
Oh.
But of course, we'll touch base with Mr. Craig while we're out there.
Yeah, Tabby Cat probably be around.
Quiet 4th of July. It's going to be really weird when you think about it.
Oh yeah.
I mean, there's no reenactment this year.
No.
They canceled that. They weren't going to have it anyway. They were going to have that political some sort of political conference rah-rah thing out there. I'm having a hard time remembering who that was going to be, but that got canceled. So it's probably going to be the quietest 4th of July in years.
Well, if the park is still not loaded with a lot of tourists, that'd be a good time to go out on the battlefield.
I think it would.
Yeah. So.
Yeah.
And I'm sure Tabby
I might
Cat.
also get a chance.
I'm sure Tabby
What's
Cat
that?
will be there too.
Oh, absolutely. I'll be hitting her up when I get up there too. There's a lot of people I haven't seen in a while. And then, of course, my friend out at the seminary, I didn't even know he was going.
Huh.
I was like,
Wow.
wait a minute, weren't you getting your degree in drama when I saw you last? I was like, this is kind of a big change for you.
Well, I won't get a go.
We have one question, and that is, what's the earliest entity you've been able to pick up era-wise? You can go back to the Confederacy, but have you been able to go back further than that?
Oh, that's a little tough. You get that mindset when you go into a location, and that historic precedence of that location kind of is stuck in your head. It's kind of hard. And I've had that trouble with mediums too when they walk into a location. We did Fairfield. All we could get one medium to pick up on was Civil War. And I tried to explain to her that, well, you realize this building was built in, don't tell me.
Huh.
And I'm like, well, then your mind is going to be stuck in exactly what you want to perceive.
Right.
If I don't tell you.
Huh.
You might see other things that will click with an earlier time era, but you're stuck here. So sometimes it is good for the medium to have at least a little information.
Right. Wow. So you're going to go to Gettysburg. Is there anything else that you've got that's going to be coming up?
I'm hoping to connect with Dr. Larson out at University of North Carolina, Wilmington. He's hoping to do a summer session haunting class out there. and hopefully that will get off the ground, and I'm supposed to help him with that. So it'll be kind of fun to do university level,
Right.
continuing education.
Well, you got the Battleship North Carolina. Before I got into actual ghost hunting or anything like that, when I was living there, I'd go out on it during the day sometimes if I didn't have anything to do and just walk around. There wouldn't be that many tourists out there. And it's really weird. You can climb up into where the big guns fired from. You can go down into the ship where the chow hall was, and just, I mean, it's real interesting to walk through the whole thing. But it's eerie if there's nobody else around and you're walking down through the bowels of the ship.
Oh, yeah, I've done that before. I'm not that particular ship, but I remember I got a room at the Queen Mary, and it was literally the night before Christmas. It was like there was very few people there, and so I had the run of the whole place all night long, and so that was kind of eerie to go through that and walk around.
And there's Fort Fisher. That was an interesting battle in Carolina Beach. So there's a lot of areas around that you can go to from the Civil War history and earlier, because it was also they fought the British too there. So,
yes.
There's a lot
that's one thing I have to remind people when we go out that way is, like, this is the oldest part of the country. You have, French Indian War, you have Red War, you have Indian incursions, well, if you want to call them incursions. They were there first. You have the, War of 1812, and then you have the Civil War.
Oh, yeah.
And then, of course, out of Gettysburg, too, most people forget that they did World War II maneuvers.
Yes.
Out on the battlefield there. So, Gettysburg's been there for quite a while.
Wow. Jeff, you still with us, or?
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
I'm just listening.
I didn't know if you was. You got anything you wanted to add, Jeff? You haven't talked very much.
I was trying to look up something to get the quote right, and now I'm trying to remember what it says. The way things are going through the country the past few months, the beginning of 2020, it's almost like America's built on hundreds of thousands of Indian burial grounds.
Yeah. Oh, wait. Yeah, I love that one. Yeah, funny how that works.
Well, there's even close to where I live here in Ohio. There's different places where Indian burial grounds are.
Okay, I think you're missing the point.
Well, I know what you're saying. I'm just saying that there's Indians everywhere, and you can come across their stuff at any time.
Yeah, and I have done that. I've been down by the hunting trails down along the Des Moines River, which was used by the French fur trappers really early on. And I picked up language that is not
safe for work.
It's definitely Native. It's definitely Native American of some kind. So it's not very loud, but it's there.
Yeah. So July is volcano month, right?
Volcano month.
It's the volcano.
There goes Yellowstone. Well, we've got aliens too, obviously.
Yeah. Have you heard any uptick in UFOs?
Yeah, I heard it was like who's got, somebody was joking, who's got alien invasion down for January? I'm like, dang, I have
I think Barbara had that game out, didn't you?
Yeah, there's a catastrophe bingo card out there somewhere. So pretty much can go through it.
Heavens.
Well, talking about UFOs, next week we have Thomas Wortman on. So we'll find out all about UFOs with him, because he's the Ohio director of MUFON.
Well, I need to talk him into making that dream glove.
What'd you say, Darcy?
You'll have to ask him the quarantine question, too, if he's noticed an uptick of reports from people that are in quarantine that haven't noticed things before, but all of a sudden are.
I think we spoke about that last time it was on.
Well, a little, but I read somewhere where, matter of fact, I think it was on the article that Darcy sent, that there has been an uptick in UFOs also. So
Oh yeah, I think that was in there. Yeah.
Yeah. Hmm. So we'll have to find that out next week. And
Oh yeah.
so our time is just about gone. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to let you tell everybody how they can follow you and contact you and all the good stuff that you do. And then I want you to stay on till we're off, and then we'll thank you.
Okay. Well, you can find me at Paranormal Researcher Darcy McGrath, or you can look me up under Quantum Psi PSI group on Google, and that'll take you there too. That's the group page that I work with. And again, if you have any experiences that you've had during the quarantine, I would love to hear about them. If you want to send them to me, maybe we can hook you up with a survey and get some more information from you. I'd really appreciate it.
All right. With that, Barbara, you got any last remarks before we go?
No, just everybody please stay safe. We're getting out of quarantine, but there's other stuff going on, and
Yes.
continue to wash your hands.
Yes. So,
Please.
Jeff, you got any last things?
I need work.
I need work. Are you laid off or?
I've been laid off since March.
Well, I mean,
That's the thing when you work at a tourist attraction. It's like they consider things like museums not essential.
well, I mean, when they open back up, are you supposed to still have a job?
I sure hope so.
Oh.
I haven't heard otherwise. So, I mean, they've been in touch with us saying, we're hoping
Oh.
any day now.
I definitely
Thanks,
miss
Ed.
the reenactors are just like chomping at the bits, like, yeah, we want to do something.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I mean, I wish I had enough money just to spend time out in Gettysburg. That would be awesome. Because, of course, Craig would show me everything. So, yay.
Oh yeah.
And we want to make his book into, a movie.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Wow. So I guess we're pretty much ready to jump off. I mean, I got a little over a minute, but we're probably just going to go ahead. Do you think it's too early, Barbara?
Well, we got a few minutes,
Go
so please, everybody, read the newspaper. There's a lot going on out there in the world, but everybody can check it out. And to our friends in New Orleans that are about to get hit by a very big tropical storm, please batten down the hatches, because it's starting hurricane season.
I'm sure a lot of places have already boarded up. How easy is that?
Yeah. Add us to the murder hornets. was that on the?
Is it murder
Was that on the
hornets
card there,
do very
Barb?
much? Yeah,
Hurricanes
murder
are on the bingo card. Yeah.
Oh, okay. They are on the card. Okay.
Yeah. Murder hornets.
Yeah, they told
too.
me.
Yeah.
We might have some real hectic weather this year because of all this. Also, they might just want to tear everything up. So,
Well, of course, Reuters has reported that a lot of the top doctors are now saying that the CCP virus has diminished in its danger levels. People are coming in with much milder symptoms, and it's curable. We know it's curable, and even one of the fake studies claiming that hydroxyl is fatal or doesn't work has been retracted because
Right.
they were like, yeah.
all right, it's time for us to go. We will see you next week at the same time. So this is Henry Foister.
Jeffrey Gould.
And Barbara Duncan.
So good night,
Darcy
everybody.
McGrath.
You've been listening to the Paranormal View on the ParaX Radio Network. Join us again next week at the same time for more of the Paranormal View.